Hello, dear students. Today we are going to see an introduction to the course Literary Criticism. It is a core subject designed for the III B.A. English students. This course covers literary critics from Plato to the modern critic F.R. Lewis. We will be seeing how the different schools of criticism evolved starting from the classical times to the modern age. I suppose we all enjoy reading a literary text. It may be a poem, a prose, a novel, or a short story. It can be anything. But how do we enjoy reading a text? When somebody comes and asks you whether you liked the text or not, see, only a few are able to come out with the reason for liking a text or disliking it. Some may say that the characterization is good. Some may feel that the way the author has described is really good. Some may observe that the author has used excellent themes, and some others may not be in a position to express themselves. That is how a literary text is enjoyed by an ordinary reader. We don't often always come up with similar opinions. Do we? Do we enjoy a text the same way the others enjoy it? Certainly not. But criticism is something different. It is not a matter of giving a review or just making some suggestions and saying that the text is good or not. Let's see what literary criticism actually means. M.H. Abrams defines criticism as a branch of study concerned with defining, classifying, expounding, and evaluating works of literature. S. Literary criticism is nothing but an analysis of a literary text. It is a serious discussion by a critic who puts his thoughts across to the readers in a methodical way. Whatever his judgments are, he makes them so authoritatively that absolutely there is no confusion at all. Thus, the role of a critic is very important, for he shows us the right direction to enjoy a literary text. Now, let's try to define a critic. He is one who judges a work of art. He puts it to a thorough scrutiny and finally passes his judgment. He lets the readers know whether the text is worthy enough to be treated as something excellent. He follows a methodical way to analyze the text. Having traveled in the realms of literature, he knows how to criticize and what to look for in a text. He points out the merits and demerits of a work. His task is not just to point out only the flaws, but also appreciates all that is praiseworthy. His is a disinterested approach. He analyzes the text as it is and shows no bias. He is not prejudiced. There is no place for his likes and dislikes. At times, he lays down rules for writing. He talks to the would be writers as to what he should do. In some cases, the critics interpret the works so that the readers can understand them better. Moving on to the limitations. Of course, not all critics come out with flawless judgment. A critic, though not biased, may be influenced by these two factors: trend of the age and attitude of the critic. Both these naturally influence the critic, for he is conditioned by what his age offers him. His mental makeup is shaped by the critical standards of his age, that there is some sort of restriction to his intellectual freedom. Also, not everyone thinks alike, and therefore, the critical views expressed by one critic may be similar, dissimilar, or completely contradictory compared to the other critics. And what one looks for in a text may also vary from person to person. One critic may look for morality in literature, another for aesthetic pleasure, and a third one for both. The critical canons differ from age to age, and therefore there can be no fixed principles of criticism applied to works of all ages and writers. Also, the critical canons at times become outdated that they are found irrelevant to a particular age. Let's see how criticism began. Criticism is said to have begun in ancient Greece around 5th century BC. When there was a decline in the national character and standards of social and public life, people naturally started questioning the role of literature in shaping the society. It was an age of intellectual awakening when all established institutions and customs were questioned and there was a free discussion on all subjects. Literature declined and philosophy and oratory thrived. We can also see people like Socrates going about everywhere preaching values to people to mend the society. It was Aristophanes, the writer of comedies, who first discussed the relative merits of Aeschylus and Euripides in his work The Frogs. Therefore, he was considered the first critic, and we can say that with him began the regular criticism. In England, criticism started with Sir Philip Sidney, who drew his ideas from classical critics, for there were no precedents in English. Now, let me introduce the types of criticism. There are three different kinds of critical modes applied to analyze literature in a broader sense: legislative criticism, aesthetic criticism, and descriptive criticism. Moving on to legislative criticism, it lays down rules for the art of writing. It addresses the writers than the readers. It tells the would be writer what rules he should follow for creating a literary text and how well it should be done. Except for Sir Philip Sidney, the whole of the Elizabethan criticism insisted on what rules a writer must observe for creating a work of art. The critical standards then prevailed were mostly drawn from Greek and Latin literatures, since literature in England was at the budding stage. Except Chaucer, there were no great writers, and English writers were wavering between following the classical tradition and the native tradition. Let's see aesthetic criticism. It refers to the individual activity of the mind. It treats literature as an art, something that has its own end. Literature is enjoyed for what it contains and for the beauty it expresses. It has nothing to do with religion, morality, or science, and it probes into the nature of literary art and formulates theories accordingly. These are some of the writers: Dryden, Addison, Coleridge, Walter Pater, Oscar Wilde, and I.A. Richards in the modern time, who had practiced this aesthetic criticism. Finally, we have descriptive criticism, the latest of the three critical modes, one of the most popular modes practiced by many critics. They aim at analyzing the themes, methods, and effects of an individual work. Some of the examples are Ben Jonson's Conversations with Drummond, Dryden's prefaces, where he actually discusses his own works to defend them from his attackers. And then we have Dr. Samuel Johnson's preface to Shakespeare, which was written to defend Shakespeare. As a final point, we can see these critics using either legislative or aesthetic norms to justify their works, or they may follow any other critical modes. There are so many other critical approaches based on these three major modes we just saw, which are used by critics to analyze a critical text, like historical criticism, biographical criticism, psychological, Marxist criticism, new criticism, post colonial criticism, and so on, which we can see in another video lesson. Now that we have come to the end of this lesson, I hope I have given you enough information to make you understand what this course literary criticism is all about. Let's delve deeper into this course in the forthcoming sessions. Thank you.